I never thought I'd be the kind of person to post about workplace drama, but here I am. My name's Evan, and until a few months ago, I worked as an operations analyst for a mid-sized logistics company in Ohio. I liked my job well enough. It wasn't glamorous, but it made sense to me. I enjoyed finding patterns, fixing inefficiencies, making things run smoother. My boss, Greg, was the regional manager, a man who loved being the loudest voice in every room. When he started, people liked him. He was charming, funny, the kind of guy who brought coffee for everyone and told you were part of the family. But over time, that charm turned sour. Greg wasn't a leader. He was a leech. He took credit for everything good and blamed everyone else when something went wrong. I saw him do it to others, but I guess I didn't think it would ever happen to me. The turning point came when the company introduced new time-tracking software. Supposedly it was to increase efficiency, but really, it was Big Brother in digital form. Every click, every minute you weren't typing or moving your mouse, it logged as inactive. Greg loved it. Every morning he'd send out a spreadsheet ranking employees by their activity percentage, like we were in some twisted productivity competition. One day, out of nowhere, I got an email from him. "Evan, please come to my office at 3 p.m. We need to discuss your performance and time-tracking discrepancies." My stomach dropped. I'd been working like crazy, skipping lunch most days. What discrepancies could he possibly mean? But when I walked into his office, the smirk on his face told me everything. He pulled up a chart with my name highlighted in red. "According to the system," he said, "you've been inactive an average of 43 minutes per day this month." I thought he was joking. 43 minutes? That's what bathroom breaks and lunch. He leaned back in his chair, smug. "Doesn't matter. It's theft. Company policy is clear. You've been stealing company time." That word, stealing, made my jaw tighten. I told him that was ridiculous, but he cut me off, saying HR was already involved and my termination would be processed immediately. Just like that, after years of work, I was fired. I tried to stay calm as I packed my things, even though people were staring, whispering. It felt like the walls were closing in. But as I walked out of the office, I passed Greg's door, which was slightly open. I heard him on the phone, laughing. "Yeah, I told you I'd get rid of him. The less he sees, the better." I froze. The less I see? That line stuck in my head for days. Fired for 43 minutes of inactivity? No. Something else was going on. It didn't make sense, and the more I thought about it, the more it felt like Greg needed me gone. He'd wanted me out fast. But why? A few days later, I reached out to my friend Maya in accounting. I didn't want to sound paranoid, but I asked if she'd noticed anything weird about Greg lately. She hesitated before saying, "You didn't hear this from me, but there'd been strange expense reports under his name, stuff that doesn't add up. Like dinners, hotel stays, but no client listed." That got my attention. Greg was known for schmoozing clients, but personal charges disguised as work expenses? That was serious. Then I called Ryan, a friend from IT. Since my account was locked, I asked if he could check my time logs, just to see if there were any changes before I was fired. He went quiet for a long time before saying, "Evan, I shouldn't tell you this, but someone with manager-level access edited your logs the night before you got fired." My heart started racing. Greg had faked my time records. That's why I was suddenly inactive. He'd set me up. And if he'd gone that far, it meant he was hiding something bigger. I spent that night staring at my computer screen, thinking of every interaction, every odd comment, every time Greg disappeared for client calls. The way he laughed that day after firing me replayed in my head like a broken record. I didn't know what he was doing, but I knew one thing: I was going to find out. He'd stolen my job, my reputation, but I wasn't done yet. I started making a plan. If Greg thought he could frame me to protect whatever scam he was running, he was about to find out just how badly he underestimated me. I didn't have access to company systems anymore, but I had contacts, knowledge, and a whole lot of motivation. I was going to expose him, and I didn't care what it took. I didn't realize it yet, but what Greg was hiding wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. And by the time I uncovered it, both of our lives would look very, very different. After a few sleepless nights replaying every detail in my head, I realized I couldn't just let Greg get away with it. He had faked my time logs, ruined my reputation, and laughed while doing it. I needed evidence, something undeniable. So I started digging, carefully. My friend Maya was nervous about helping me, but she agreed to keep an eye on Greg's expense reports. A week later, she called me late at night. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. She said she'd noticed several payments made to a consulting vendor that didn't exist in the company database. The invoices looked legitimate, but the vendor's address traced back to a private mailbox in another state. The total amount billed over 3 months? Nearly $30,000. That number hit me hard. Greg wasn't just bending the rules, he was stealing from the company. And he probably fired me because I was the one most likely to notice. The more I thought about it, the more sense it made. I'd handled several of those logistics contracts before he pushed me off the projects. Maybe I'd already been too close to discovering something he didn't want found. I told Maya to stay quiet for now and not to access anything from her work computer again. I didn't want her getting caught. Then I called Ryan from IT again. I told him what Maya found, and he agreed to help, but only off the record. He mentioned something interesting. Greg had recently started using a personal laptop in his office, something completely against company policy. He's been connecting it to the Wi-Fi under random device names, Ryan said. Like he doesn't want the system to recognize it. That was my opening. I might have lost my job, but I still had my old company tablet. It wasn't connected to the internal system anymore, but it still had cached credentials for some old client dashboards. That could be useful. Over the next few days, I built a picture of Greg's habits. He arrived early, around 7:30, but he didn't start working until at least 9. Around noon, he'd go to lunch, but according to the access logs Ryan quietly shared, he wasn't leaving the building. He was staying connected to the office Wi-Fi in his office, sometimes logged into strange sites that Ryan couldn't fully trace. Something called CloudSync Pro. It sounded innocent enough, but when I looked it up later, it turned out to be a private file-sharing service often used to mask data transfers. Greg was uploading something. I didn't know what, but I had a feeling it wasn't company spreadsheets. That weekend, I drove past the office just to see what I could see. The building was dark except for one light on the second floor, Greg's office. His car was in the lot. My first instinct was to confront him, but I stopped myself. I needed proof, not a shouting match. So instead, I started documenting everything: dates, times, patterns, even when his office lights turned off each night. Maya helped me match the timeline with expense charges and meetings he claimed to have had. They didn't line up. One night, I noticed something strange: an expense labeled Client Meeting, Columbus, on the same evening his office light stayed on past midnight. He wasn't meeting anyone. He was in that office doing something else entirely. By now, I was obsessed. Every free moment I had went into piecing together what he was doing. I used to think I was a logical guy, someone who worked with data and patterns. But this was different. This felt personal. Greg had destroyed my career, and now I was watching him steal from the company that fired me based on his lies. About 2 weeks into my investigation, I got a message from Ryan: "You might want to see this." He sent a screenshot, an internal network log showing a data transfer from Greg's account to an external email address. The address was a personal Gmail, but the name attached to it made my stomach twist. It was Shannon Porter, the regional VP's executive assistant. That was huge. Shannon had access to confidential corporate data, including budget approvals. If Greg was working with her, it explained how his fake vendor invoices kept getting approved. But why would she risk her job for him? Money? A relationship? Blackmail? I didn't know, but I was starting to realize this went much higher than I expected. I needed a way to expose him publicly, in a way the company couldn't bury. Quietly sending the info to HR wouldn't cut it. Greg probably had friends there, and I couldn't risk the evidence disappearing. I needed to make it impossible for them to ignore. Then came the breakthrough. Maya managed to access a shared drive folder Greg had left unlocked for budget coordination. Inside was a spreadsheet titled Vendor Allocation, Q2. It looked normal at first, vendor names, payment dates, but in the metadata, she noticed something odd. The document had been edited on weekends, from Greg's personal IP address, and one of the vendor names matched the fake one she'd found earlier. That was the smoking gun. He was creating fake vendors, submitting invoices under their names, and paying himself through a dummy account. Classic embezzlement. But the missing piece was proving that the payments were reaching him. I couldn't access his banking info, obviously, but I didn't have to. I just needed to connect the vendor's mailbox address to him. I did some digging online, cross-referencing business registry data with local property records. When I finally found it, my hands were shaking. The mailbox address was registered to a company owned by Greg's brother-in-law. That was it. Proof. Greg was funneling company money through a fake consulting firm run by a relative, and he'd fired me because I was too close to catching on. I thought I'd finally won. I thought the nightmare was almost over. But that same night, I got a message from Ryan that made my stomach drop. Greg knows someone's been looking at his files. He's accusing Maya of data theft. HR's investigating. My heart sank. I dragged her into this mess, and now she was the target. Greg was moving fast, covering his tracks and finding new scapegoats. I realized then that if I didn't act immediately, he'd bury everything and ruin her too. I had the evidence, but I needed to make it public, and I needed to do it before Greg figured out I was behind it all. The clock was ticking. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Maya's face when I imagined her getting that call from HR. She had helped me when no one else would, and now Greg was trying to destroy her the same way he destroyed me. I couldn't let that happen. I stayed up pacing my small apartment, trying to figure out my next move. Quietly collecting evidence hadn't worked. Greg already suspected someone was digging, and if he connected the dots, it'd all be over. I needed a plan that would expose him publicly and immediately, something he couldn't twist or cover up. That's when I remembered something Ryan mentioned a few weeks earlier. Every regional manager's financial reports were automatically uploaded to a shared drive that corporate reviewed once per quarter. The next upload cycle was in 4 days. If I could insert the proof into that drive before then, it would land directly in corporate's hands before Greg even knew what happened. The problem was, I no longer had access to the internal system, and Ryan couldn't risk using his credentials without getting caught. But Maya still had access, and though she was terrified, she agreed to meet with me in person so we could plan. We met in a dimly lit diner outside town, the kind of place where no one asks questions. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. "They think I leaked financials," she said quietly. "Greg told HR he noticed unauthorized activity under my account." My blood boiled. He was already setting her up as the scapegoat. I told her everything I'd found, the fake vendors, the payments, the link to his brother-in-law. At first she was stunned, then angry, then scared. "Evan, this could ruin him," she whispered. "And us." I told her I didn't care. He'd ruined our lives first. I laid out my plan. She'd discreetly upload a folder titled Audit Review into the corporate finance drive, containing the fake invoices, the vendor metadata, and the registration data showing Greg's connection to the company address. I'd create a timeline summary and label it with the quarter's reporting format so it would blend in until corporate opened it. The key was making it look like just another part of Greg's report until it reached the right hands. Maya hesitated but eventually nodded. "I'll do it tomorrow," she said. "But after that, I'm done. I can't risk my job anymore." I couldn't blame her. The next day, everything seemed quiet, too quiet. No word from HR, no calls from Ryan. I assumed the upload went through, so I tried to distract myself. But around 4 p.m., I got a text from Maya. "He knows." My heart jumped. "Who?" I wrote back. "Greg." He confronted me in his office. He said someone's been tampering with his financial reports and that he'll make sure I regret it. "I think he's checking the shared drives." Panic surged through me. If he found the folder before corporate did, he'd delete it and we'd be finished. I told her to get out of there immediately and not go back to her desk. 10 minutes later, she texted again, "Security is walking me out." HR called it a temporary suspension. "Evan, what do we do?" My hands were shaking. I had one last option. If Greg was deleting files, I needed to get a copy before he did. I called Ryan and begged him to help me one more time. He resisted, but when I told him Maya was being escorted out, he sighed and said, "Give me an hour." Those 60 minutes felt like forever. I sat by my laptop, refreshing my email every few seconds, waiting. Finally, a message appeared from a secure address Ryan used for testing, backup.zip. I opened it and there it was, all the files Maya had uploaded, plus the access logs showing Greg's account activity as he tried to delete them. He was digging through the system right now, probably realizing he'd been exposed. That's when I decided to make my move. Instead of waiting for corporate, I was going to send everything directly to the company's entire regional leadership team, every VP, every compliance officer, and the CFO himself. It was reckless, maybe even stupid, but I didn't care. I drafted an email titled "Urgent, Unauthorized Financial Activity by Regional Manager Gregory L." and attached the evidence folder. Before hitting send, I hesitated for a split second, imagining Greg's face when he saw it. Then I clicked. Message sent. I expected some kind of immediate explosion, calls, messages, chaos, but nothing happened. The hours crawled by in silence. Midnight came and went. The next morning, I woke to more notifications than I'd ever seen in my life. My inbox was full. Corporate investigators, compliance officers, and even someone from the legal department wanted to speak with me. Greg's world was burning. But then something unexpected happened. Ryan texted me, "You need to get offline now." Confused, I asked why. He replied, "Greg showed up at the office early. He's furious. He's blaming you and threatening legal action. HR just got a call saying he's pressing charges for data theft." My stomach dropped. He was flipping the narrative again, making himself the victim. The man was terrifyingly good at it. Within an hour, I got a formal email from the company's legal department demanding I stop all communication and return any proprietary materials in my possession. They were protecting themselves, of course, but it meant Greg was still fighting. I sat there in disbelief, watching everything unravel. I'd done the right thing, but somehow I was still the one under attack. That afternoon, Maya called me from a private number, her voice shaking. "Evan, Greg's not at work. They said he left after a call with legal and hasn't been seen since." That sent a chill down my spine. Greg wasn't the kind of person to just disappear. If he was running, it meant he knew the walls were closing in. But running from what? I thought maybe he'd try to skip town, but then Ryan sent me one last message: "He's not gone. He's in the building." IT just saw someone accessing the servers under admin mode from his office. The cops are on their way. That was the moment I realized Greg wasn't just trying to delete evidence. He was trying to destroy everything, every trace of his scheme, every file that could prove what he did. And if he succeeded, everything I'd fought for would be gone. When Ryan texted that Greg was in the building trying to access the servers, my entire body went cold. I was already sitting in my car, parked in front of my apartment, staring at the endless stream of emails from corporate, but the moment I read those words, I started the engine. I didn't even think about it, I just drove. The office was 20 minutes away, though it felt like forever. My mind was racing the entire time. Why was Greg there? What was he trying to destroy? If the police were on their way, why hadn't they stopped him already? It was early evening when I pulled into the parking lot. The sun was setting, painting the windows orange, and the building looked eerily empty. Only one car was parked near the entrance, Greg's black SUV. My chest tightened. He was still inside. I knew it was stupid to go in there, but every instinct screamed that if I didn't act now, everything I'd done would be wasted. I used my old keycard, half expecting it not to work, but to my shock, it still did. The moment I stepped into the lobby, I could hear faint noises upstairs, the rhythmic clacking of a keyboard, fast and erratic. I crept up the stairwell, careful not to make noise. Greg's office light was on, same as that night weeks ago when I saw him from the parking lot. I could see him through the glass window, hunched over his desk, typing furiously. His face was red, his movements frantic. I could hear him muttering to himself, swearing, then slamming the mouse against the desk. The screen in front of him flashed bright white for a moment, then I saw what he was doing. He wasn't just deleting files. He was wiping the entire shared drive clean. Years of records, reports, financial histories, gone in seconds. Panic surged through me, and before I could stop myself, I stepped forward and opened the door. "Greg," I said, my voice louder than I expected. He jerked around like he'd seen a ghost. "What the hell are you doing here?" he snapped, eyes wide. "You're trespassing." I could see sweat dripping down his temple. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "You're making it worse." He let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head. "Worse? You think you've exposed me? You think anyone's going to believe a disgruntled ex-employee over me? You're done, Evan. You and that accountant friend of yours, you're finished." I took a step closer. "You faked my logs. You framed me. You've been stealing from the company, and now you're destroying evidence." His grin faltered for a split second, and that tiny flicker of fear told me everything. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice cracked. On his monitor, a progress bar ticked up to 97%. I rushed forward, reaching for the mouse, but he grabbed my arm hard, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't touch that," he shouted. We struggled for a second, the chair rolling back and hitting the cabinet. Papers scattered across the floor. I tried to pull free, but he pushed me hard, slamming me against the wall. "You think you can ruin me?" he yelled. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." I pushed him off, and for a brief second, we both stood there breathing hard, staring each other down like cornered animals. Then, from somewhere down the hall, I heard the sound of heavy footsteps and radio chatter. "Police." Greg froze. I saw panic flash across his face. Without a word, he turned and slammed a USB drive into the computer's port, yanking out another cable connected to an external hard drive. "You're too late," he said quietly, almost to himself. The sound of the officers getting closer grew louder. Greg looked at me one last time, and I swear I saw something break in his expression, fear, anger, desperation all at once. Then he grabbed his laptop and bolted out the side door just as two police officers burst through the main one. "Hands where we can see them," one yelled. But Greg was already gone. I stood there, shaking, surrounded by the mess he'd left behind. The computer screen still showed the progress bar, it had stopped at 99%. Ryan had been right to call them. One of the officers approached me cautiously, asking who I was. I explained everything, how I'd been fired, how Greg had been stealing, and that he was trying to erase evidence. They called for backup to search the premises, but Greg had vanished. They took my statement for over an hour, then secured the computer for forensic recovery. When I finally walked out of the building, it was dark. Police lights flashed across the parking lot, and Greg's SUV was still there. They'd find his laptop eventually, I thought, but part of me knew he wasn't stupid enough to leave everything behind. Over the next 2 days, everything exploded. The company went into crisis mode. Corporate froze all regional accounts, and an official investigation began. I got call after call from lawyers and investigators, each one asking me to recount what happened. Maya was reinstated pending the outcome, and Ryan was interviewed as well. The good news was that the data Greg tried to delete wasn't completely gone. The IT forensics team managed to recover backups from an offsite server. The bad news was that Greg had disappeared completely. No one knew where he was. He hadn't gone home, hadn't used his credit cards, hadn't contacted anyone. He was just gone. For a week, I thought that was the end, that I'd done what I could, that he'd run away from the mess he created. But then I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a deep voice said, "Is this Evan?" I said yes. There was a pause, then, "This is Detective Harris with the Columbus Police Department. We need to talk about Gregory Larson." My heart skipped. "Did you find him?" I asked. Another pause. "We did," the detective said. "We found his car at a motel off Route 62. There's something you need to see." The silence that followed felt endless. "He's dead, isn't he?" I finally asked. The detective sighed. "Yes. It appears to be self-inflicted. But there are some details that don't quite add up. We'd like you to come in." I sat there frozen, phone pressed to my ear, my mind spinning. Greg was gone. The man who destroyed my career, who tried to erase everything, who thought he was untouchable, was dead. But the detective's tone told me something wasn't right. And when I finally saw what Greg had left behind, I realized that the real story wasn't over. It was only beginning. The drive to the police station felt like a blur. The detective's words kept echoing in my head. It appears to be self-inflicted, but there are details that don't add up. When I arrived, the air inside the station felt heavy, the kind of tension you can't see but can feel crawling up your spine. Detective Harris was a tall man with a tired face and a calm voice that somehow made everything feel even more serious. He handed me a cup of coffee, then motioned for me to sit. "We found him in a motel room just outside Columbus," he said. "Single gunshot wound. Weapon in hand. But the scene looks staged." I frowned. "Staged how?" He handed me a manila folder. Inside were printed photos, Greg's body slumped in a chair, his laptop open on the desk beside him, the words "I'm sorry" typed in a blank document. But what made my stomach twist wasn't that, it was the hard drive lying next to the laptop, wrapped neatly in a plastic bag with my name written on it. "That was found next to him," Harris said. "There's also a note." He slid a folded piece of paper across the table. My hands trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was Greg's, shaky but unmistakable. It read, "You were right, Evan. I didn't act alone. I thought I could fix it before they found out, but it's too late. They'll come for you too. Protect yourself." I stared at the words for a long time, trying to make sense of them. "Who's they?" I asked. Harris shook his head. "We were hoping you could tell us." He explained that the motel security footage showed Greg arriving alone late the night before, carrying 2 bags. One had his laptop, the other was never found. There were no signs of struggle, but there were inconsistencies: the position of the gun, the absence of fingerprints on certain items, the missing second bag. "We're treating it as suspicious," the detective said. "And this drive he left, it's encrypted. Our techs can't get in yet, but we think it might contain whatever he was trying to protect." I left the station that night in a fog. Greg was dead, but something about it didn't feel like closure. The note, the warning, it all felt like a message from beyond the grave. I took a cab home and sat staring at the drive for hours, wondering if I should even touch it. But curiosity won. I plugged it into my laptop and waited. It asked for a password. My first guess was stupidly simple, Greg Larson, and to my shock, it worked. The drive opened, and what I saw inside made my blood run cold. There were hundreds of files, documents, screenshots, recordings. They weren't just about Greg's fake vendors. They included names I recognized, regional VPs, senior accountants, even people from corporate headquarters. They were all part of it. The embezzlement wasn't just Greg's doing, it was a company-wide operation. Greg had been the fall guy. The vendors weren't all fake, some were shell companies controlled by executives across multiple regions. The money trail led through layers of transactions designed to look legitimate, but the pattern was clear once I saw enough of it. Millions had been siphoned off over the last 2 years. And from the timestamps, it was obvious Greg had been gathering this evidence before he died. He wasn't destroying the data when I caught him that night, he was trying to back it up. The wipe I'd seen on his screen wasn't deletion, it was an upload. He'd been sending it somewhere. I opened the last file in the folder, a short audio recording labeled "For Evan." My heart stopped when I heard his voice. If you're hearing this, it means they found me before I could finish. You were right, I changed your logs, but not because I hated you. I was told to. They said you were getting too close to the numbers. I didn't think they'd actually fire you. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. They used me. And now they'll use someone else. You're the only one who can stop it. There's a folder marked Cycle B. That's the pattern. Follow the payments. Trust no one. The message ended abruptly with a sound that could have been a door opening. I sat there frozen for a long time, my mind reeling. Greg hadn't been the villain I thought he was, or at least not entirely. He'd been a pawn, just like me. The company I'd spent years working for, the one that fired me for stealing time, was rotten from the top down. Every fake invoice, every client expense, it all connected. I spent the next 48 hours diving into the files, tracing the money trail exactly as Greg said. It led to an offshore account under a corporation called Silverline Consulting, owned by a holding firm registered in Delaware, one whose listed director was none other than Shannon Porter, the executive assistant to the regional VP. My jaw tightened. She was the link. She'd been moving money on behalf of higher-ups, using Greg's department as cover. That's why he fired me. That's why he panicked. He'd realized he was about to take the fall for all of them. The more I pieced together, the clearer it became. Greg hadn't killed himself. Someone had made it look that way to tie up loose ends. I didn't go to the police right away. I didn't trust anyone, not after what Greg said. Instead, I contacted a friend of mine from college who worked as a freelance journalist. I sent him everything, the files, the recording, the trail. It took him 3 weeks to verify it, but when the story broke, it was like a bomb going off. Multi-million-dollar fraud scheme uncovered at Midwest Logistics, corporate executives under investigation. The article included excerpts from Greg's recordings, evidence from the drives, even a timeline showing how whistleblowers had been silenced or fired. It went viral overnight. Within days, the FBI got involved. Shannon Porter was arrested. 2 regional VPs resigned. The company's CEO stepped down for personal reasons. And me? I became the anonymous whistleblower at the center of it all. I never took credit publicly, but I didn't need to. Maya got her job back with a promotion. Ryan quit and took a better job elsewhere. The company restructured entirely. Greg's name was cleared in the final report, listed as a deceased cooperating witness. I stared at that line for a long time when I read it. He wasn't innocent, but in the end, he tried to make it right. I'll never know exactly what happened in that motel room, but sometimes I like to believe that Greg left that drive for me on purpose, that he knew I'd finish what he couldn't. The truth cost both of us everything, but it finally came out. And every time I see a company brag about their integrity values now, I can't help but think of Greg's words, they'll come for you too. Protect yourself. He was right. The higher up you go, the dirtier it gets. But at least now, thanks to him, the world knows just how deep it went.